Welcome to our weekly show for the National Association of Independent Medical Practices. You can find us at NAIMP.org. NAIMP is an organization focused on helping independent medical practices become more successful by providing innovative discussions, networking with like-minded professionals, and opportunities for growth, education, and increased revenue. Check out our website today at naimp.org.
Welcome to today's podcast. This is Shirley Cress-Dudley. We're excited to have Josh Gershonowicz, Marketing, Strategy, and Analytics Expert from Rebuild Nation. Josh is the founder and CEO of Rebuild Nation, a comprehensive marketing and strategy company located in Midtown Detroit. Josh started Rebuild Nation in 2012 and has over 8 years of experience in marketing and marketing strategy and analysis for medical and dental practices. Josh and the Rebuild Nation team pride themselves on integrity, transparency, and delivering measurable results to help their clients achieve an average of 4-to-1 return on investment. And Josh, that 4-to-1 return, 400%, that's pretty big. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely, Shirley. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me on. I'm really happy to be here. Typically what we see from our clients is a 4-to-1 return on their investment. That means that all advertising and marketing dollars, including our fees, are equaling about a 4-to-1 return on their investment. So if they're spending, let's just say, $10,000 a month on advertising, typically they're seeing $40,000 and sometimes even higher $1,000 in return.
Okay, well that's a high number. So let's learn, how can they do this?
Well, we go big picture here. So the first thing what we want to do is look at what's going on with your current marketing strategy. What are you usually using for your advertising? How are you measuring the results? And what can be done in the future to make changes in order to have a more consolidated feel of all of the marketing and advertising that's currently happening. So typically what we do is we look at what is your CRM, customer relationship management, what is your web development, how are you doing with your website, are you getting out there in the community, are you talking to people, do you have a good public relations effort, what type of media buying is going on, what kind of marketing materials are you using, do they look good, do they look professional, do you have any TV going on, are you doing search engine optimization, are you branding, are you using PPC advertising, pay-per-click advertising, are you engaging with people on social media? So it's really about taking all of these things on a big and a high level and trying to understand what else could we do and what else needs to be done in order to have a good consolidated marketing strategy.
And Josh, I have a question about that, because a lot of docs think if they do one thing, like just do the television or just have a website, that it's enough. But I guess what I'm hearing from you is that they need several tools in their toolbox. They need to do more than one thing to be successful.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a really common mistake from a lot of medical professionals, is they really feel like, you know, they have a good effort or they're really doing a good job by only doing one thing, and the reality is they just don't know whether or not that's working. Mm-hmm. And in that case, we want to make sure that those numbers are really telling the story. So we come to too much across the fact that the numbers that are coming in from dentists or from medical professionals really aren't telling them whether they're producing or actually making money on the advertising that they're currently doing. So we install different strategies and analytic tools to make sure that what they're spending money on is actually working and producing results.
Oh, that makes sense. So they need analytics. They need numbers to be able to tell. I understand. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the numbers don't lie, and I mean the truth is we really see a lot of medical professionals assume that what they're doing is working, and most of the time it never really is.
Okay, well, here's another question, is that different medical and dental practices, we want to know how to grow the practice and where are patients coming from?
So that's a great question. So typically what we see is most medical professionals should be getting their business through referrals. And I'm sure anybody listening to this podcast right now understands that most of their business is generated through referrals. But it's ultimately about making sure those referral strategies are utilized in a way to actually increase the amount of new patients that a person is receiving. So typically what we see is 20%, let's say, of your patients are coming from referrals, 20% might be coming from print or other different mediums, and then maybe 10% online if you see people going to your website. And half the time what we notice is you guys have, or most people, sorry, have no idea where their patients are coming from. So we try to make the point of qualifying that information and really understanding that information, which is really most important, because what typically a medical professional should see is about half of their patients coming through referrals and the other half coming from different sources of advertising.
Wow, that's a large number of referrals.
Yeah, and it's really about leveraging what referral strategies can be used and how to use them. And I think later on in the presentation we're going to touch on that a little bit. But typically there's an assumption out there that just by developing relationships with people that have typically referred to you and you continue to receive referrals from them is enough. But it's never enough, because there's always people that can come into place and take away those referrals or be in a position to sort of leverage those relationships that you thought you had for themselves. So it's a competitive marketplace, and with consolidation in the industry, it's going to become even more competitive, and it's really important to maintain those relationships and to leverage them in order to grow your practice.
Okay, let's see. Return on investment. Tell us a little bit more about that. That's very important to all medical and dental practices.
So if you're spending money in advertising and you don't know where it's going, or you think you know where it's going, it doesn't work. What you need to know is exactly how much money I'm spending on. Let's just use the example for print, because it seems to be the easiest example to remember. Let's just say it's print, for example. If you're spending $2,000 or $2,500 on print advertising and you see an increase in new patients, how do you know that the increase is coming from those print ads that you're sending out? Because if you're not tracking and if you're not utilizing any tracking methods to actually know they're coming from print advertising, it could just be a spike in your business based on something that's happening online. It could be based on something that's happening with your patient referrals. It could be some other public relations special that you're running. And it's not a matter of just running the advertising and trying to think that it's working, but you have to know, and you have to really know what's happening. And for us, what we do is we want to make sure that the client really understands that, and then it's all laid out in front of them. And typically what we see from a return on investment standpoint is you're going to get your best return on investment based on referrals. Obviously those really don't cost you anything. You can come up with different referral strategies to benefit patients in order for them to refer additional patients. But you see the most return on your investment through referrals, and I think later on we'll talk a little bit about walk-in and internet as well.
Okay, super.
So I think what's best for me now is to really just jump into some of the strategies. If you're okay with that, I can just kind of jump right into the strategies about what doctors and medical professionals should be doing to sort of make sure that their marketing is in line with modern day tracking methods.
Oh, absolutely. I think that'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Okay. So one of the first things we want to make sure that is done in any medical practice is surveys. You have to know exactly how your patients feel about you, and sometimes honestly it's not always the best information you're getting feedback for. But what we do in our surveys is we structure our questions in a way that those responses to those questions allow for us to be in a position to take the words that people are using and actually use them in the advertising. So in the event that somebody's describing you as a very nice person or a nice dentist, for example, well, why not use the word nice in advertising? If that's something that keeps coming up over and over again, we want to leverage that word and leverage the fact that somebody's describing you as a very nice person. So that could be something that's signaling to us saying, well, hey, all these people are now looking for the nice dentist, just to kind of give you an extreme example there. Also with call tracking, I think this is one of the most important things that exists now, especially with different websites that you can go and purchase call tracking numbers from. Every advertising piece that you send out, including any pay-per-click ad online, should have a separate call tracking number. So you need to be in a position to know specifically, are they calling me from this print ad? Are they calling me from my website? Are they calling me from a pay-per-click ad? Are they seeing me on TV? And if so, what are they using to call me? And I think what we've discovered with some of our clients is a lot of times patients that are currently your patients get a print ad in the mail, or they're going online to search and try to find you to call you, but it's actually existing patients that are searching for your phone number and existing patients that are searching and using your print ads to call that number. So it's not necessarily new patients, but it's a good way to also, with some of the different call tracking companies that exist out there, to monitor how your staff is performing on the phone. And as you know, I'm sure, anybody that's answering the phone poorly and not doing a good job is just not a good reflection of your practice. So call tracking is so important, and it's really a good way to kind of implement a lot of different tracking methods of where your patients are coming from.
Good information.
One of the other things we kind of want to touch on a little bit is an online website. Obviously, most people now either have one or they've had one for quite some number of years. But what we found is most medical professionals, their website is either outdated and it's just not relevant to what they are. So what we're typically seeing is a non-responsive design. Non-responsive means it's not going to be shown well on mobile phones or tablets, and that's really where the majority of traffic is starting to move to.
Mm-hmm.
So you want to be in a position where you have a nice, responsive design, and you don't want a templated website. So typically you see companies out there that have, they sell the same website with the same approach, and you pay a very low monthly fee. That's not something that's relevant today. You really need something that's custom, that's going to be responsive, that's going to be giving patients what they're looking for, and not just something that's going to be more of a brochure for an online presence. It just doesn't work anymore in today's world.
I've noticed that, and there's a lot of large companies out there, and I'm not going to name any of them, for dentists and also for doctors, that medical professionals that have templates, and you can find the same website on 100 different websites and the same content, and there's no way at all for them to show up in the search engine if they're just picking out a template that 50 other dentists are already using.
Yeah, that's right. And not only that, but for search engine optimization, it's not good to have the exact same content as the guy right up the street,
Mm-hmm.
right? And when you're talking about somebody searching for your services, you need to have all of your services listed, but patients are looking for that information that they're looking for that describes your practice on your website. They don't want the same templated stuff that everybody else has, right? So they want to know exactly, well, if you're a dentist, let's say, and you're doing implants, well, how does that process work? What's going on? Do you have any, is it a free consultation for me to come in for implants? Or what's the description and what's customary to your practice? So that's really one of those things that's really important as well. I think one of the things we're going to really touch on now is Google Analytics and making sure that the tracking of your website is integrated. So what we found a lot, and this is kind of, again, going back to some of the templated website approaches, is most of these website templates don't exactly have Google Analytics installed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? So they're not looking at where their patients are coming from in terms of geography. They're not looking at what they're using to find the website, maybe mobile, maybe tablet, maybe just searching online, what browsers they're using. And there's lots of different ways you can break that down even further, but that's really vital information. It's one thing to look at the information, but it's another thing to understand and how to make changes from it. So one of the things that's most important for anybody is not to just look at where your visits are coming from, or are your visits going up, or are they going down, or what's happening, but how do you leverage that information in order to make changes to your existing website to produce more new patients? Because at the end of the day, I think we're having this conversation because people want to, get more new patients, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So let's learn how to leverage that and use data in order to make that data work for us to get more new patients. And I think that's one of the most important things, and it's also one of the most important things that a lot of small business owners are really missing. So the next thing I think we're going to really jump into is social media. So there is kind of this from our clients that we've seen and from other clients that we've talked to, throughout the country, typically social media kind of has like a little bit of a negative connotation when you're talking about medical practices. But it's one of those things that if you're using social media right, it's not going to be something where you're going to drive a whole bunch of new patients in from it. So what I think there's there's misunderstanding out there that social media is going to get me 100 new patients a month, and the reality is that's not the case. Social media, in my opinion, is more focused on a referral strategy. So that's you engaging with your existing clients and you engaging with your potential new clients, in order to leverage those existing relationships and drive. Because too often, we see that the hours aren't always consistent, or people take vacations and next thing you know they're closed for 2 or 3 days, especially towards the end of the year. We see it typically with a lot of medical professionals.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't work. When people are looking for something, they need something, so we need to make sure that you have pieces in place to make sure everybody's covered in that case. So I think one of the things, too, as well, that's really important, it's not always touched on. I know we sort of mentioned it a little bit in the beginning of the presentation, was public relations. So public relations is really, in this case, is how we're defining it as just making sure that you're doing a good job of communicating well in your community. People need to know who you are, what you can do, and I'm going to start that one over. I'm sorry.
All right, so let's just take a pause and then back up. So just count to about 5 or 6.
So I think one of the next things we want to really get into is public relations. I know we mentioned it a little bit in the beginning of the presentation, but public relations is all about engaging with your community. It's too often that a medical professional is in a small town, or they're in kind of a medium-sized town, but they're not doing a great job of talking to the right people in the community and getting people to know them. Also giving back, because you don't want to just be constantly marketing, but not doing something to engage and give back. So you want to make sure your face is out there, you're talking to people, you're putting yourself in a position where you can drive new patients to you just by having a presence in the community and doing a great job of it.
And I'm seeing more and more of that, of the docs getting it, that getting involved in the community really does help grow their practice, but also it gives them a good feeling to be able to give back to the community. So this is an exciting change to see more and more medical and dental practices doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important. It's one of those things that gets forgotten or lost or just put to the side because maybe they don't have somebody to go out and talk to people, but it's really about those extra efforts that are going to be made on a consistent level that are the most important things in a practice. One of the things that I want to really kind of go back to is really the design process of designing a good ad. So we kind of talked a little bit about analytics, we talked a little bit about surveying, but what you need to be able to do, and what's really important, is utilize that data in order to produce something of a very high quality. So we have a kind of in this slide here, and for the listeners, if you were able to download this later, and I think you're going to mention that later, how they're going to be able to do that, this slide kind of describes that design process. So we go through a process of data analytics, studying the information, how to utilize that information. Then it's a little bit of a discovery. Okay, now we have the pieces in place. What's the market research? What's the area? What's the demographics of the area? Now we did that survey earlier. How do we utilize that survey in order to pull keywords and information in order to produce something that people might be looking for? Then a creative design, and then obviously the next step would be production. So we sort of outlined a 6-step approach to creating a well-rounded marketing piece specifically for print ads that could be used in the community. That's not just the typical thing that you see in the mail or discounted services that you see in the past.
Now we're at the walk-in traffic.
Yeah, this is one of the most important things that I think gets forgotten in a lot of cases,
mm-hmm.
Location. So if you don't have a great location, you probably want to consider either figuring out a way to make sure you know and people know where you are, or that you're in a position where maybe you decide to move later on once you build up your practice a little bit more. But location is one of the most important aspects of a dental practice or medical practice for that matter. I mean, you could think of the McDonald's example. They're on every corner, right? Mm-hmm. They're in prominent major intersections. You can't miss the signs. But why is it that you don't see a lot of medical professionals doing that, right? Mm-hmm. Typically, if you have a great location, you might be able to attract 20 to 30 new patients per month just by the fact that you have a great location, you're on the corner, and you're in a position where people are constantly driving by and constantly seeing you. So that drive-by and that walk-in traffic that can occur from that can get you, who knows typically how much it can get you based on your community, but you could receive up to 20 to 30 new patients, and some of our clients actually do based on their location.
Oh, excellent, and something we don't think about regularly.
That's right, and yeah, that's right. And one of the things as well is effective print advertising. Mm-hmm. We really want to be in a position where if you have a great location and you're utilizing effective print advertising, we sort of talked about that process. I could sort of go over, if you don't mind, I can go through kind of like the 3 ways of how to make your direct mail most effective in our opinion.
Oh, yes, that would be great. Okay? Sure.
So I can just kind of read these off here, and it's listed in the slide, but I think it's a good point. Is one of the things is, make sure you are sending your pieces to the right audience, both demographically and geographically. So typically what we don't see is a medical professional really understanding, what they're doing. They might throw a couple $100 thing, or they might sign up for something, but what's any sales rep would provide you with the right information that you need in order to make that decision, but you can't just make a decision. You really have to look into that information a little bit further and look at the marketing mix and what you're trying to hit and what homes you want to hit and what type of new patients you want to get. And if you want to attract the right new patients, how do you make your advertising in order to do that? Typically also, most advertising pieces are just missing a call to action. So call to action could be something that's enticing them to call, whether that's a discount, a phone number, any information that's getting them to call. You don't want to just send out a branding piece and hope that's going to work for you. That typically doesn't really work. What we want to see is a call to action, something that's going to make somebody say, ooh, I need that, and they're going to pick up the phone and call. Not everybody's looking for a medical professional every day, but you want to be in a position where you're constantly marketing, you're constantly in front of them when they're ready to make that buy. Mm-hmm. And I can kind of use the example of a car commercial, right? Not everybody's looking for a car, but when you are looking for a car, you tend to notice a lot of the car commercials a little bit more, right?
Yes.
So it's the same thing with print advertising. We want to make sure that if you're going to be out there spending a lot of money on print, and it's not cheap, you want to be in a position where you have a call to action, you're sending it to the right people, and that you're constantly repeating and making sure that message is in front of them.
Good information. So now we've got the new patients coming in the door, but how do we turn them into loyal patients and get referrals from them?
Yeah, so this again is where typically most medical professionals get all their new patients is through referrals. But I think one of the things that we want to make sure every user or every listener, is listening to and understands here is that there are things that you could be doing in order to leverage those existing patients that you have coming through the door in order to generate more patient referrals. So think about what you could do to benefit those patients for referring to you and how we could leverage those strategies in order to do that. So we've offered, in some cases, discounts to patients on additional services, or I've heard some dentists, for example, offer restaurant gift cards or things along those lines. But what's the most cost-effective way for you to really generate referrals? And what we like to see is we don't want to see anybody spend money on gift cards or gas cards or things along those lines to give to patients in order for them to then refer and they bring patients in. What we want to see is you discount future services, or you offer something in your practice that you could potentially do if it's cosmetic related or things along those lines that don't require specific insurances where you're discounting an insurance company. But there's a lot of ways for you to be in a position to generate more referrals by leveraging those contacts that you've already established and created.
Good information.
Also, one of the things that really gets left out from a lot of practices nowadays, and I know it's being done in some cases, but is email marketing and an effective CRM strategy. So we said CRM earlier. One of the things you really want to make sure that's being done is effective communication and through email marketing. So it's a lot more cost effective than just mailing out birthday cards in the mail or something along those lines. You could be doing that through email, and some dentists and the medical professionals are, but what they're not doing is they're not doing a very good job of making sure those communications look good. So there's a lot of templated websites and also templated approaches to email marketing, and those choices really aren't going to allow for well-designed branding pieces that are going to make a typical person that's looking to expand their practice and make them step up above the typical neighborhood practices throughout the area to make something really look good. So there's different ways you can do that. Also, you want to make sure that any email marketing that's being sent out is optimized for whatever the person is looking at it on. And probably most of your listeners listening to this podcast are probably thinking that when they get email, they probably always look at it through their phones, right? Well, a lot of their communications that they're sending to patients aren't optimized for their phones, so don't you think that it should be, right?
I've never thought of that. That's a really good point.
Right. And I mean, even when we communicate to some of our clients, I mean, we're texting, we're calling, we're emailing through, and everything is done through their phone because they just don't have time to sit down and look at a computer. And their patients are the same way. So the communications have to be optimized and have to look good and be a responsive design on email to make sure that it's really going to be effective for them. So I think, did you want me to jump into online advertising next? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, online advertising would be great.
So I think there is consensus out there that, online advertising, I've heard many different things. I've heard, A, it works for me. I get a lot of new patients from it, and B, I'm wasting all my money, and nobody's coming to my website, or they are coming to my website, but the ads aren't working. So online advertising is going to be most effective if your content, which is any copy, images, pictures, video on your website, is if you're clicking on an ad on Google, for example, and it's driving traffic back to your website, you want to make sure that you're providing the user of whoever's clicking on that ad exactly what they're looking for, and be in a position where you have a call to action, a phone number, and other information that they're looking for in order to pick up the phone and call, because ultimately you need them to call and schedule an appointment. So online advertising is so important, and it is probably the most important right now, but too many people don't have things optimized the way that they should be, so they're not really seeing good results. And we can kind of go back to the website portion of that. So too many unresponsive design websites. So if your website's not responsive, somebody's searching on their mobile phone, they click on an ad, they go to your website, it doesn't look good, you're not going to really get anywhere. So we want to be in a position where the online advertising is more effective by having a responsive design and providing information that they're looking for. So just to kind of recap here, I want to just kind of touch on a couple points, and I know we've been kind of going a little bit over a lot, if you will. So the benefits of kind of rethinking your marketing strategy, and for anybody that's listening out there, you really need to rethink this approach and rethink everything and how you're utilizing it. If you look at it like let me think for a second. If you look at it like a piece of pizza, for example, you have all these different slices. Well, how can you break down those different slices into different pieces in order to make your marketing more effective? And the truth is you have to do them all. So you can't just do one, you have to do everything. So one of the benefits of a new strategy is increasing your patient referrals. You're more efficient, you're doing a better job of tracking, so you know what your return on investment is, not just overall, but your return on investment per marketing medium. So your return on investment for each individual print piece, your return on investment for your online advertising, your website, anything you're doing, if you're doing radio or TV or any other marketing that you could potentially be doing. You're going to have a more productive staff because you're going to be receiving more new patients. Also, you're going to be tracking all of your advertising dollars and where your dollars are being spent, so that way when you start to expand and you start to get busier, you could be in a position to actually increase your advertising budget and then continue to expand your practice.
This is all great information, and I know that those that are listening appreciate it because they want to have multiple locations and higher revenue. And so tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so there's a lot of people out there, they want to expand. You know, they want to have more new patients. They want to increase their practice. They want to open up a second location across town or what have you. But you have to really want it. And what we've seen is, you know, people say they want it, but they're not actually willing to make the effort to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, if you're going to do this and you're going to make an investment in your advertising and your marketing, don't just do one or two things and think that's going to work for you, because it really doesn't. You have to make the effort to really doing a consolidated marketing plan, figuring out how to generate more new patients through referrals, figuring out how to get more out of your print, for example, more out of your website, making sure you have a great website that's responsive, it looks good, it provides information people are looking for, and invest in yourself, invest in your growth. And what you'll notice is that as long as you're tracking, you're going to see those successes and you'll be able to put a little bit more money into it over time. So if you're listening to this, I would imagine that you want to grow your practice. So if you're going to do that, let's make an effort of tracking where your marketing is coming from and actually making the investment and making it happen.
Great information. So if they want to learn more, then you can get in touch with Josh at josh@rebuildnation.com. His phone number is 855-725-3628. If you go to NAIMP.org, you can view the slides that we were going through and also copy down his contact information and also listen to the other webinars or podcasts that we do on a weekly basis here at NAIMP. So, Josh, we really want to thank you for sharing your expertise. This is great information. We appreciate you coming today.
Thank you very much for having me, and if anybody wants to check out our website, feel free to go to rebuildnation.com, and again, you can send me an email personally at josh@rebuildnation.com. Happy to answer any questions anybody has, or if they just have any concerns or, you know, quick things they want to chat about, happy to do that for them.
All right, super. Well, thank you very much, and everyone, we'll see you next time.